Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special video. As it is WrestleMania week, by the time this video goes up, the first night of WrestleMania should be tomorrow. I wanted to do a different type of video, a WrestleMania special. So if you couldn't tell by the title of this video, this will be my journey through wrestling, where it began and how we got to where we are today. So let's get straight into this. Before we get to the start of my journey, let's give some context. My dad was a casual wrestling fan and he enjoyed it a lot when he was younger. Every so often there'd be wrestling on TV and I watched some of it, but I never really cared too much. I never saw what was so great about it. Suddenly, the fateful day came. April 7th, 2019. If you know your wrestling history, you'll know that this is the date, of course, of WrestleMania 35. The 2-hour pre-show was on, and suddenly all I wanted to do was watch. So I sat down and watched. The opening match was Seth Rollins vs. Brock Lesnar, and Seth became my immediate favorite. Of course, as a kid, whether you watch or don't watch wrestling, you gotta love the New Day. So when Kofi won, I was overjoyed, and that's when it hit me. I wanted him to win. I knew it was fake. I didn't know any of the build or storyline to the match, and yet I wanted him to win. It's that adrenaline rush that I and other wrestling fans love. That feeling of praying that your favorite wrestler wins and does good in the company. Unfortunately, seeing as WrestleMania ran until midnight, I wasn't able to watch all of it and went to bed, but that's where it began. Suddenly, the next night, I was ready to watch Monday Night Raw, and that's where I had my first instance of disappointment in wrestling. The advertised main event was Kofi Kingston vs. Seth Rollins, winner takes all. I was so excited for that match. My energy was ecstatic. One night after, I fell in love with wrestling, and I was going to see one of my favorite dream matches. Of course, any wrestling fan who's seen more than one show will know nothing like that ever really happens. The match turned into Kofi Kingston and Seth Rollins versus The Bar in a tag match, but I loved it nonetheless. The next night on Tuesday, I sat down and watched SmackDown. I couldn't wait for next week's Raw. A whole week I had to wait for the next wrestling show. It felt like forever, but finally it did arrive. Sometime in June, my dad told me I should give NXT a watch as TakeOver 25 had happened, and he said it was a great show. It took me a few weeks to give it a watch, but as soon as I watched the first match of TakeOver, I was so invested. The Undisputed Era caught my eye very quickly. NXT got added to the weekly wrestling shows. We now had Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday time slots filled with wrestling, and the occasional Sunday pay-per-view. Slowly over time, I began to watch older shows and expand my knowledge on the matter. A few months and pay-per-views later, and Extreme Rules was around the corner. Father's Day was close, and so I convinced my mom to buy tickets for the three of us, even though I was really convincing her to buy tickets for me. When we arrived, I could feel it in the air. The experience, the excitement, all of it. Now, I'd never been to any type of live event before, or other than like a play. I've never been to a concert, nothing like that. Still haven't. We sat down and watched the action, and it felt so great. I remember it as if it was yesterday. So excited to see my favorite wrestlers. What was even better is there was a 10-man battle royal to see who faced Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam for the title, and so some of the SmackDown guys were involved, so I got to see many awesome wrestlers. One of the greatest memories I have from that show was the live debut of The Fiend. For weeks we'd watched the creepy Firefly Funhouse promos Bray Wyatt gave us, eagerly awaiting his return. Typically for a big return like that, it occurs on pay-per-view, but no. It happened in the Nassau Coliseum, my first ever live WWE event. That was amazing. Seth Rollins won the main event, and I was damn well ready for SummerSlam. Since I started watching, of course, I'd done everything in my power to convince my parents to take me to a pay-per-view, and it will happen someday. October then rolled around, and boy, did a lot happen in October. I'd been hearing a lot of stuff about a new wrestling promotion called All Elite Wrestling. My dad told me it would be a real wrestling company made by some of the New Japan guys that I'd never heard of. We argued over whether NXT or AEW would go on the big screen and which one would go on the iPad. He won, of course, and AEW was the center of attention. All I really knew about AEW was that was where Dean Ambrose and a few other WWE stars had gone to. The first Dynamite began to play, and I remember watching the opening match, Cody versus Sammy Guevara. Of course, being a closed-minded WWE mark, I rooted for the WWE guy in every match, but I began to see how good wrestling could be when there weren't DQs or interference every single match. It was also around this time ads for the next Raw at the Coliseum began to play, and so my begging began to return, and it didn't look very likely that we were going to be able to go. AEW caught my eye very quickly, and we continued to watch weekly. That Friday was SmackDown's move to Fox. The main event was Brock Lesnar versus Kofi Kingston for the WWE Championship. I'd had a slight change of heart and was rooting for Brock to have a squash match. Just before the bell rang, I said to my dad, "Watch, Brock Lesnar hits 1 F5 and that's it." A few seconds later, and the prophecy came true. It was pretty funny, to be honest with you. So now we had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday slots filled. Of course, that following Sunday was Hell in a Cell. I'm not going to remind you what happened there. And then at the end of the month, on October 31st, was Crown Jewel. Seth Rollins versus The Fiend for the Universal Championship in a Falls Count Anywhere match. The match cannot be stopped for any reason. Since this was a school day, I had to wait until we got home to watch, and the match came on just as my dad got home. Little did I know he'd already watched the match earlier in the day. I sat eagerly on the edge of my seat, my heart pounding that I would see Bray walk out with that beautiful red belt. And when he did, I popped so hard. That's an awesome shot. That's probably going to be my screensaver.
Gary?
What?
The mandible claw.
Boom, Sister Abigail.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Is that what you thought?
My dad then decided it was a good time to show me the tickets he purchased for Raw, and well, I'd say I was a little excited.
You know what that means, right? Brock Lesnar versus The Fiend.
One thing that worried me is that I wouldn't be able to see The Fiend because he was now technically on SmackDown. The advertised main event was a dark match between Seth Rollins versus The Fiend for the Universal Championship in a steel cage match, but I didn't have much faith in that, as the last Raw we went to had an advertised Seth Rollins versus Baron Corbin for the title, and that never happened. The following night on SmackDown, something amazing happened. NXT was scheduled to compete in Survivor Series this year, and that's when the invasion began. NXT guys were featured in almost every single match of the night. The main event was Daniel Bryan versus Adam Cole for the NXT Championship. I began to gain some excitement back that the NXT guys would show up on the Raw that we were going to. We arrived at the show and that same excitement was in the air.
Who is it? Who is it? Triple H? NXT!
The show opened a lot like the last one we went to, with Brock Lesnar, this time the WWE Champion. About halfway through the show, and Seth Rollins cut a promo before the King of Kings made his way out to the ring.
Guys, for the first time in a long time, I don't know.
It was here that I saw the Undisputed Era waiting to walk out.
Seth, you are even with me. We are against me.
I basically lost my mind at this point before the OC also walked out, and then I really lost it. The main event was going to be Seth Rollins versus Adam Cole for the NXT Championship. My second Raw, and I was going to see a dream match. The match was amazing. I don't care that it ended in DQ. I got to see the WWE Champion and the NXT Champion in the same night. The whole night, I'd seen a square-shaped item covered in a curtain above the ring. I debated whether this was the cage for the advertised main event, and after the Raw, they announced the dark match would be happening, and it doesn't matter how short the match was, I got to see The Fiend with the red belt, and my night was absolutely complete.
Introducing first, he is the Universal Champion,
Of course, something else that made my day was seeing AJ Styles with the United States Championship. Both my Raw experiences are some of the best memories in my entire life. It was November when we got another cat, and I fought enough to name him after my favorite wrestler, AJ Styles. Survivor Series came around, and it was an awesome show, giving NXT the recognition they deserve. For months now, since SummerSlam, I'd been asking for a WWE replica title belt, and then Christmas came around. It's tradition in my house to put funny names as gift givers on all the presents, and there was a rather strange-looking rectangular box addressed to me from Forrest Gump. I thought it was a poster or something, but it was the first present placed under the tree about a week before Christmas. Christmas Day came around, and my dad let me open it first. It was beautiful. The WWE Championship. I loved it so much. Later that night, as my last present, I would receive the AJ Styles side plates, and my life was complete until I wanted the next one. It was also December when we got New Japan World, and I began to invest myself in the art that was Japanese wrestling. I'd done more research on New Japan guys like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. Quickly, I found myself as a Bullet Club mark. One thing I also forgot to mention was sometime in October and November, I began to watch the wrestling YouTube shows like MLW and NWA. This meant there was wrestling Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I tried Impact a few times, but I never found myself quite invested, and Ring of Honor just wasn't for me. Wrestle Kingdom had me extremely invested in New Japan, and I found my next wrestling love. Nothing significant happened for a few months, and then the pandemic hit. Of course, people across the world, including myself, were thrown into a depression of sorts. It seemed wrestling was the only thing to look forward to at that point. A lot of people had said that with the no fans and the oddness of it all, but for me, I was just happy to have wrestling. MLW shut down, NWA shut down, and I couldn't bear to watch Impact for more than 5 minutes. Once again, I was down to 3 days of wrestling a week. The depression had grown strong, and I had come to the consensus that making a large purchase might make me happy, and so I bought myself the NXT Championship. We got 2 more cats, and I named one of them after another one of my favorite wrestlers, Finn Balor. Time passed, October rolled around, and it was my 1-year anniversary with my girlfriend. She got me the Adam Cole side plates for my NXT title. During this time, there were a lot of smaller things happening, such as the squashing of The Fiend, twice. I promise soon I'll release a video in memory of The Fiend and what he could have been. Not much exciting had happened. My favorites shifted every other week, and WWE had grown extremely stale and still feels that way. Everything had become predictable. Nothing had really felt the same since Super Showdown, and not just because of the pandemic, because slowly it began back in December. AEW had become the show to look forward to. November of 2020, and I slowly became invested in Impact. MLW had returned, but I hadn't grown quite as invested as I once was. I certainly wasn't going to pay for NWA, as it was only on pay-per-view. We'd canceled New Japan at the start of the pandemic, and still have yet to get it back. But Impact had become really interesting. It was a short time after this that Kenny Omega had yoinked himself the AEW World Championship and headed to Impact. Mind-blowing for someone like me, and it gained a lot of excitement again. A few months passed, and here we are today. A few promotions I forgot to mention are NXT UK and 205 Live. I keep up with NXT UK, but I'm not a weekly watcher. I find it interesting, but it's nothing eye-grabbing for me, although I always watch when Walter has a match. He's amazing. And then, who really watches 205 Live? Let's be honest. Next week, there will be wrestling every single weekday. Raw Mondays, NXT Tuesdays, AEW Wednesdays, Impact Thursdays, and SmackDown Fridays. WrestleMania will be the first WWE show in over a year to have fans. I'm hoping that with the fans returning for at least one show, we might get that same WWE energy there was back in 2019, but only time will tell. Our current champions across promotions are Walter, Bobby Lashley, Finn Balor, Roman Reigns, Kenny Omega, Jacob Fatu, Nick Aldis, Rich Swann, and Will Ospreay. Of course, you know all of this, but it's crazy to see how far we've come since just 2019 when I started watching. Walter, Daniel Bryan, Tommaso Ciampa, Brock Lesnar, No AEW, Tom Lawler, Nick Aldis, Johnny Impact, and Kazuchika Okada. Wild. I don't know what the next step is in my wrestling experience will be, but I know the journey to get here has been one of the best. Pro wrestling has become somewhat of a religion to me. It essentially runs my schedule at this point. To see what wrestling is today, what with alliances between AEW and Impact, no more fans at shows, developmental shows like NXT in the forefront, and so many shows to choose from, it's exciting to see what happens in the next decade or so in terms of progression. Hell, Chris Jericho, one of AEW's largest stars, is going to be on Broken Skull Sessions with Steve Austin on the WWE Network next week. Whatever happens next, I'm happy to call myself a wrestling fan and maybe even a mark, but I don't see my love for the industry ever ending for a long, long time. This has been my WrestleMania special. I hope you enjoyed watching my journey through wrestling and how we got to where we are today. Remember to like, subscribe, do whatever you can to support the channel, and for more wrestling content, hit the bell icon to get notified when my WrestleMania and NXT TakeOver reviews come out. And for my thoughts on wrestling moments and title changes, follow my Instagram, Jerry Pro Wrestling, or if you like pop culture, follow my alternate account, Jerry the King 1223. That's it for now, and I'll see you in the next one.